Hello, welcome to the Brains Body Podcast. I'm Dr. Christopher Kevin Slaton, Human Learning Consultant with the Progressive Medicine Institute of Focused Learning. And I'm here today to talk about the brain's body's learning system. And so let's get started. When I talk to you about sense and receive paths, I'm really trying to help you understand how your brain learns, how it senses and receives contact, right? And how it transfers that contact. But before I go any further, I want you to know how I measure this, right? I use a number line where you have a straight line and at both ends are arrows so that I can have one end as my start point, right? And the other end as my end point. And then everything in between, right, is divided by the midpoint, right? And then you have space, you have energy, space, and time that you can measure, right? So as I talk about the flow of energy, action, and feelings, it moves across my number line, but at the same time, my sense and receive paths are also at opposite ends. My sense path is at one end, and my receive path is at the other end. As I pointed out to you, you have forward and backward feed. And so when you graph this, you can see exactly what I mean. So when you have contact has to be transferred inside your human system, right? Through your brain, body, and sense events. So that's moving that energy across that space and time, right? And the goal is to receive it, that it be received. And the problem is that we've been talking about what happens if you have difficulty, if you're hurt and your sense path is damaged. That's your social cognitive state. That's hurt, which means that if it's affected and you are unable to experience those feelings moving through you, right? Then your receive path, right, does not operate the same because the experience may be short circuit, cut off, but it's not in its full, complete flow, right? And so that's what we're talking about when I talk about the brain's body learning system is how do you move through that? So the sense and receive path functions is the first step to learn how to inform your brain, right? And remember, everything that I'm talking about is based upon events, affects, and goals that you can measure when you apply them to the continuum, right? So that start point becomes your event point, right? The end point becomes your goal point, right? And then the midpoint becomes your affect point because we're always talking about mental, physical, emotional health, right? So if I put these three words in front of you, sense, feel, and focus, right? Feel is your affect state. It's the midpoint. That word that's in the middle, you're always going to put in that center, right? Because that's the effect state. So as you pursue the goal to focus, right? What's affected? The way you feel things, right? And what is the event? The event is you're trying to sense, to feel, to focus. But focus being a goal, you have to learn how over time. That's the purpose of setting this up so that you can look at it from an action learning perspective because you're real. And as I keep pointing out, everyone can see you, right? And you don't study the body, you study the brain because over this action learning continuum, what are you measuring? Process. You're measuring action, you're measuring change. And if you don't have change, that's when you know you have a behavior pattern. Because change means that the action that's moving through you is causing changes in you. Because we're human beings, and when we experience something, we are renewed, we are moved forward, we are changed, and we're supposed to change. Why? Because that's our creativity. As we change, we change the way we do things, right? So let's keep going, because there's the process cycle that I want to talk about today, and that's the receive, organize, and express process cycle. The goal is always to express, right? So when you apply this to academics, for example, when you go in the classroom, the goal is to learn how to express specific feelings that relate to program learning, right? So the event, right, is to receive it, right? Because I said before that the behaviorist model ignored the brain. So it went to stimulus response, right? They're not stimulus receive response or stimulus no, it went straight to. And so I'm trying to let you know that you have to have the process cycle in there so that you can begin to make better sense of academics. So when you put the process variable in there, right? Like Binjamin Blooms done with the taxonomy of learning, he put the process cycle in there. He put receive, organize, express. Okay, that's the progressive education movement. That's its contribution to human system science or human learning or process learning. Because under his approach, you had to be able to apply what you were learning as you were learning it, and the teacher had to be able to assess it, right? And so your response had to have a synthesis to it, right? The teacher could evaluate those components that are moving through you as the contact, the information, and the instruction, right, becomes more materialized, right? You write it, you talk it, you're doing math, whatever that instruction is an output. And that's what I'm talking about when I say express, okay? So the other side of this equation was Skinner in the black box. Skinner's black box theory dealt with making the learner as predictable as possible. There was no sense of brain, there was a sense of mind. So you study ways to make the mind more predictable. That's program. Make the mind more predictable. So instead of reflect, you remember, okay? You code it in your mind so that you can recall it a specific way. Process is reflection. You reflect, and reflect means synthesize. You synthesize the experience of experiencing that experience. So inside that simple experience are the other experiences. And again, that's the brain's forward feed. That's what helps you to learn. But you got to understand, it begins with your sense and receive path functions, because if you can sense and organize the way you feel things, see how that works? You can sense to organize the way you feel things, then you're more apt to focus. Why? Because you're already in the process mode. And that's what I talk about. That's what I'm trying to get everyone to understand. Because academics is so important. And like when you fall behind, it's so hard to catch up. But the way you catch up is methodical. You develop your timeline. You understand what grade you're in. You understand what phase of life you're in, right? And on that continuum, you have a start point. Okay, so you're 20 years old. You want to be a graduate of some school by the time you turn 23. Okay, that's the goal. Your start point, your goal. Now, what happens in between is determined by your action. That's how that works. I can measure that. Einstein, when he was measuring gravity in space, right? He had a pole perpendicular, same type of number line that I'm talking about now, so that he could figure out height, distance, and so forth. And then you had the float. And that's statistical analysis of what I'm saying. So you can create your own statistics based upon what I'm trying to get you to see. So those that are into the numbers, right? This is a number line. And so every time a participant moves towards the event and then activates their human learning system, they can measure every step. And so you have regressive and progressive action, right? And the progressive action goes in the direction of the forward arrow. The regressive action goes backwards towards what? The start point, right? Because your number line, positive to the right, negative to the left. You can measure everything that you're doing because that's what we left off talking about. So what I'm saying is, in human system science, you can measure brain, body, and sense events. You can change the way you sense and feel and focus your brain. You can change the way your body is used to participate. Because as you're studying your brain, right, you understand now what the body is actually doing. When it makes a mistake, can you correct that mistake? And how do you correct that mistake? By understanding how you sense, feel, and focus your sense and receive path, right? And it just doesn't happen overnight. It has to be sustained. That's why I want you to see the continuum, because you learn through the study of action, right? Because that's physics. That's real, right? That means you can capture it through the senses. You can hear it. You can capture it, right? And if you can capture it, you can write it down and you can draft it, put it on a chart. And now you can chart a person's ability or capacity to function inside a system. Okay. And that's what we're really talking about, because we have to be able to help the helper. I said help the helper, because again, help yourself, help the helper, right? So I always talk about that because that's the experience of experiencing the experience. The ultimate is to help yourself, help others. So yes, that's what I'm talking about right now. Education is about helping self, help others, help who? You, right? So I'm not just playing with words. These are systems words, right? For example, feel, feelings, feel how feelings feel. Feel how feelings feel, right? Event, feel. Affect, feelings. Go, feel. You want to feel those feelings, okay? So that's a goal. And how do you live through it? Because once you understand and you choose to accept the process learning areas that I'm talking through, then the words make sense to you because you're trying to live to learn how to reach that goal of knowing how you feel things and knowing what these feelings do to you, right? And knowing that behind feelings, right, is thinking, reflecting, and emotion. More importantly, it's the ability to inform your brain, right? So when I do this one, you really, really appreciate it because I've been talking about this one. So here we are. Yeah, inform the brain, discipline the body, and focus the senses. So here's your platform. Your event is to inform your brain. Your goal is to focus your senses. And everything you do between the event and the goal affects your ability to discipline your body, because discipline requires focus. So if you live every day to become more informed about how to sustain your focus, you are disciplining your body. Because in order to reach that goal, you have to have discipline. That's the classroom. See, so I'm not saying that program learning is bad. I'm saying that program learning has to be understood by the person, so that the person understands that academics is not intended to take you over. Academics is intended to develop your labor, right? And for the most part, it ignores your sense of feel for self to do that. Why? Because it's in the school. It's not in the home. That's why I always say the parent has to be involved, because the parent is the transition between home and school. And that discipline, right, is always different. Okay, now you can try to take discipline from the school to home, but it doesn't work. Do your chores. You got to do your chores every single day. And it just doesn't work. Why? Because the kid understands the translation is, okay, I work at school. That's my workplace. Then you come home and you got all these chores set up just like they are in school. It doesn't work that way. It has to be natural in the home, right? A natural occurring phenomenon. You eat, you wash dishes, you get up in the morning, you make up your bed. It can't be written down in instructions because that's duplicating the program cycle. And you want process. You want your kid to be able to come in the home and just do those things naturally, right? That's what I'm trying to get you to understand, because a lot of children that I work with, right, their biggest problem was in school, they deal with so much teasing, bullying, and peer pressure, right? And then have to still maintain their level of academic performance, even though their sense path is being worn down, that social cognitive path is being worn down. They have to deal with that and continue to receive instruction and process instruction, even though the peer pressure is getting greater and greater as they move into the curriculum because it's a competitive environment, right? All I'm saying is when a kid comes home, that home has to be set up for that kid to experience. That's why I said you begin to lay down the foundation for home-based learning from the point of infancy on, so that it's processed. The kid knows, hey, let me make my bed before I get out of here because I don't want to have to do it later on, right? Whatever your methodology is, as a parent, to get your kid to do the things you know they have to do every day, right? That's part of their labor development. Labor development. Translation, which you learn how to do in a home, translate to how you live in a family. That's how I would move it, because that's reality. And it's process. It's process learning. Let's go to program again. As you move across this continuum, right, the most difficult thing to understand is that when a kid is being affected by teasing, bullying, and peer pressure, what you're seeing is the tension is what you experience in the home. The tension that builds up inside that kid's sense of feel for self. Why? Because that's what's being attacked, right? And so what I want you to understand is the human system has a tension, stress, and pressure system. You go to the doctor measures your tension, stress, and pressure systems, okay? Because these are your natural alarms. These are the things that go off when you have contact, when you interact. And that's why cooperation is so critical. Teaching you, children, others, cooperation is the most critical thing to managing the flow of emotion, thought, and reflection. So I get back to it because these are the things that you're experiencing when your kid comes home and they've been impacted by teasers, bulliers, or peer pressure. Their tension, stress systems, right, are at a disadvantage. Why? Because they have to move through it. Why? Because they have to go back. Why? Because they have to learn how to do what? Develop their labor. Many parents take their kids out of school for the same reasons I'm talking about, but the tension, stress, and pressure does not go away because the kid knows they are part of society, and eventually, even if you put them in social groupings, that's going to be the same effect, except Dr. Fielder, Dr. Marie Fielder, my mentor, taught me this one. Contact, interaction, cooperation, right? Well, let's take cooperation out because that's on the receive side. Contact, interaction is on the social cognitive side, which means that peer pressure and that tension system occurs because you have this inner sense of feel that has to have that contact because that's how you live. You live through the contact. But what really makes it rigorous is the way that you have to interact through the teasing and bullying, right? That has an impact on your receive path. Why? Because that is negative energy that you must move through. So you see, so what I'm trying to get you to understand is that we have to figure this out. How do we handle the pressure of tension and stress, teasing and bullying? How do we handle the pressure? And that's what I'm saying to you. You have to learn how to move through the hurt to experience the event and the goal long enough to change the effect. So you lay down the goals, you lay down the events, and this is what you're going to end up doing, process learning, because you have to evolve over time with discipline, inner discipline, to move through and cooperate until your brain takes the lead of the transaction. The brain's body has to be in the lead of the transaction. That's what I'm saying again. So, in the brain's body learning curriculum, that's what I'm taking you through. Step by step process cycles that integrate smoothly into program learning so that you can begin to adjust, adapt, and become more flexible without breaking, right? Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to keep yourself calm, right? Cool, right? And confident, right? So you have to have a learning system that allows you to know exactly what you're experiencing. So when you have a bad day, you know you're having a bad day. So what do you do about it? You talk about it because that's the brain's release. You talk about it, you write about it, we have a journal. That's insufficient. You have to be able to do all of them. Read, write, talk, right? Act and perform through the hurt. See? Because like I said before, when you do these things, right, each step changes the way you sense and feel contact, right? And interaction. Now, I said that the cooperation is very complex because the cooperation is in the receive path. You have to choose to cooperate. See, and that's the experience. From the sense path, you have to choose to accept the contact long enough, right, for the experience, right? And the experience means thinking to take place, mental processing to take place. So as you go across your continuum, that's what you're measuring. Process learning. How do I come to think? And if I come to think, how am I doing as I'm thinking? And I'm talking about level 2 because, see, you have to understand that to receive and organize, right, is only part of it. You receive to organize to express, right? Feelings of the instruction, the information, right? Okay, there's another level, okay? I'm not gonna hold back because you need this level because that's program, right? Bloom's Taxonomy Learning is a curriculum program to help move children through school more cognitively. It's a cognitive theory. That's why I'm saying it's process, because it deals with the student's brain. It also deals with the teacher's brain, how the teacher is supposed to read the student's information as they are responding to instruction. It has 6 variables that the teacher is looking at. Okay, but listen to this one, because I'm saying to you, no, you still have another one. You have the receive, process, and respond, because now you're in the receive path. And if you're in the receive path, your response, right? Because you got backward feed, reflection, backward feed is already coming. And so your receive path, right? Receive, process, and respond to it. That's that third level. See? Process cycle, right? Because when you receive, right, the experience of experiencing the experience, receive the experience, right? Because you're trying to merge what? The way you understand how you come to think. The most critical point, you want to be able to think, right? So let's go back and look at the 4 variables I talked about last week. Maybe it'll make more sense to you. Live, learn, think. You want to think, but you got to live. And if you live and your goal is to think, it affects how you learn. That's process learning. Why? Because your goal is to think through academics, right? And if the goal is to think through academics, then the effect is on how you learn. So if you're actually coming to think through your feelings of the instruction, right? You know you're learning. What are you learning? How to move that energy, action, and feelings through that negative state to a more familiar state where you're more confident in your capacity to respond. right? It's very complicated. Why? Because I'm talking about stuff that has been built. Let's look at it this way. Progressive education movement may have began somewhere around 1890s, early 1900s, right? Behaviorism began long. Darwinism is part of behaviorism. See? And behaviorism was entrenched in our whole culture. So when you look at the enslavement period, wow. See what I'm saying? So that gives you an example of what emptiness looks and feels like, because when Africans were taken from Africa, they had skills. Many of them had skills. But once they went through a generation or more, those skills were gone. So they were empty vessels. Okay? And that's what I'm talking about. You have to be able to understand how to move from program to process. Now, I'm talking about how long it's taken for my community. I'll call it my community. Early on in my research, I had real concerns because I couldn't find my community. Academically, I couldn't find my community. Educationally, see, because I didn't grow up in the classroom. I grew up outside the classroom. They would have called me a slow learner. See? So let's get back to the point, but I always got to tell you that little tidbit so you can connect the dots. Why I'm so into the synthesis of process and program, right? Marie Fielder taught me that contact is a cognitive state and that it has to be transferred. But the problem with the cognitive state in school environments is simply this. Now, she was a social researcher. She graduated from the University of Chicago School, where John Dewey, Hilda Tubman, Binjamin Bloom, Ralph Tyler, all those people are embedded in my practice. Why? Because she taught me how to understand contact, interaction, cooperation, and participation as process learning. See? So when I talk about these things, what am I actually saying? I'm saying to you that you cannot live without understanding how to move through contact, right? But this is the key. The cliques, the groups, the games, the assemblages of people, right, is what breaks down the sense and receive path. That was she was explaining to me. Why? Because we live in a competitive culture. And a competitive culture means that any sign of success for one person may not feel to be shared success by another person. So the teasing, bullying, peer pressure becomes a natural reoccurring phenomenon to slow you down from reaching levels of performance or participation necessary, right, for you to be successful in your interaction, right? And the interaction is the blending or the fusion of contact to interaction, the transfer point where the information meets the receive path, because that's negative energy, right? That's intentional. That's pressure, intentional pressure to stop you from participating in moving the flow of energy to your brain, right? Because of what? Hurt. And what you're being hurt by? Words. What you're being hurt by? The way people are treating you. What are you being, this is what she was telling me about this problem in school with children whom are gifted and talented. And by the time they get to the 12th grade, they are like they've lost themselves. It's like they dumped their intellect and left behind, and now they're over here in a clique. Okay, but let's get to the key. This is what she was telling me. What people don't understand is that the real cliques that run the school, right, do this because they're trying to reduce the flow of academic energy so that they don't have to work so hard. Okay, so an A is not necessarily an A, but it's an A because no one else is going to participate at the level required so the teacher can actually function in the teacher's role, which is to assess, right? Assess the flow of instruction and the student's response to those instructions and how they actually perform on those tests, right? And why? Because it is maintained, like I say, the inmates control the institution. That's what Dr. Field was explaining to me. And this is one of the most troubling problems that I faced in Merced with the teasing, bullying, peer pressure to diminish person's ability to perform inside their classroom program learning, right? To get you through that, that's what process learning is for, okay? Because you have to process that experience because you don't confront these clicks. You work through these clicks to learn these clicks, and now you can move through them because your brain's in the lead. Now you can truly avoid without ignoring the reality. They exist, but they exist at every level. Look at the highest levels in the country. They're doing the talking through the media, and the children at the bottom are implementing what they're talking about. So that pressure system, just top down, bottom up. And so the only way, well, not the only way, the way that I advocate is that you learn how to live inside the program, right? Because that's the program. Look at the program. Before they're done with you, you got to go through, look at what teasing, bullying, pressure, and what happens to you in the process. Well, I can't take it no more. You stop participating. If you stop participating, right, what's the next thing that goes? Cooperation, right? So that's a disconnect from the receive pattern. Now you're not receiving any information because you're saying no more. I'm not taking this no more, right? So you're interacting, but where's the interaction going? It's not going anywhere, right? Because it's been disrupted. The focus has been disrupted. So how do you get out of that behavior pattern? You have to accept, you have to accept or choose to participate in moving to learn how to learn through those situations. Go, affect, go. The event is to learn, the goal is to learn, and it affects how you learn. Because it's the words, it's the special words, and then they're supported. Live each day to learn how. How to what? It changes. How to perform, how to think, okay, how to read, how to write, how to talk, how to perform, how to do the things you need to do to lift yourself up and become more successful, where yesterday you were plummeting because you stopped participating. And if you stop participating, that means that you're no longer participating with your brain. Your brain cannot perform its everyday operations, which is, as I showed you on my action learning continuum line, you live each day and the brain becomes more informed. You inform the brain. And in informing the brain, you consistently discipline the body. But when you stop doing that, that's when I said last week, your senses overwhelm you. Why? Because they're disturbed and you cannot focus. You cannot focus because the energy inside you is going in multiple ways. There is no balance, okay? You're either too emotional, caught up in your thinking, right? Or you just can't stop recalling, bringing things to mind. You're shuttered, right? And you got to figure this problem out. This is what the brain's learning system is about. Stop it. Focus it, right? Let's begin to move through it. The pain and hurt, right? That's why I say mental, physical, emotional. Brain, body, senses, right? Mental, physical, emotional health, well-being is based on, in my opinion, as I'm talking to you, is based upon how you choose to work with your brain, to work with your brain to manage your body and control your senses. See, those words, powerful, but you got to learn them. But in learning them, understand they come from you. Because all the words that I use, right, are root words. They're scientific words, but I follow that Dewey strategy where your language should not be bigger than you, so that your audience don't have to go pick up a dictionary to join or understand what you're saying. It's got to be simple. It has to go straight through them. Okay? So I want to tell you that I appreciate you being here today. And I hope that you come back. I hope you stick with me because there's more sessions. And as I go forward, this is a very difficult session, right? Because I'm talking about program and process, right? Now, I had to throw in me being an African American because I had to do that because when I'm talking about program, it's more program than African Americans. Oh, seriously. That's what we had to live with, a program. And what was the program? You don't think, you just do what you're told. And if you don't do what you're told and you don't think about what you're told, then you get beat. But you're not supposed to think. See, what are you supposed to do if you're not supposed to think, right? And if you're not supposed to think, then you're not supposed to remember your life that you have, or whatever good life you may have had, or what's on the other side of the rainbow, right? That's program. You just live in the moment, right? And so you're easy to figure out. You're predictable to figure out. Now go on a school ground today, right? And look at the different groupings of the children. Go in a workplace and look at different groupings of the adults in those environments. Now tell me what the difference is. Tell me that the sense and receive paths are not systemically under attack, right? Because this is program, this is your labor, and they don't want you to reach this level of functionality. Here we were slaves, and even today, they don't want us to reach this level of functionality. And I don't say this haphazardly. I'm saying this because as a doctor of education, my experience coming through the school system, I was getting A's, but they were written down as C's. While at the same time, my colleagues who I interacted with and we frequently talked would get A's by going to the teacher or the instructor and talking to the instructor, and the instructor would give them an A. When I complained, he lowered my grade. You see? So all I'm trying to get you to understand is that that's program. Programming what? I want you to participate. I don't want your participation. I want to affect your participation. I want to affect the way you perform. I want you to become emotional about this resistance to your participation in my environment. But that's okay when you realize it, because why is he doing it? Because, look at this, he's hurt. What is he hurt by? The experience of experiencing someone else who experienced him and put that in him, that negative energy. And he has not tried to get rid of it. And that's the mental health issue that we're dealing with today, that I work through. And I'm saying to you that you work through. It's not about race, it's about economics. It's about marginalizing people so that they cannot perform. Okay. And if you're gifted and talented and have been through the system, you know very well what I'm saying to you. See? And you have to have a learning system in place that allows you to understand why you make that choice to continue to go in there and fight. See? And deal with what may feel to be insurmountable odds, right? So here again, I'm Dr. Christopher Slaton, and I'm so glad that you tuned in today. I look forward to you coming back. Human learning consultant with the Progressive Institute of Focused Learning, and also author. I mean, you can't forget that. I'm not just talking to you. I have literature that you can check out. Just go to Amazon.com and Google Christopher K. Slaton. It'll all come up. Thank you again. I look forward to you coming back the next time. Please.